Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. The safest place to be in the three worlds. So many things going on in the world now. They got viruses, influences, and this and that. Political upheaval, economic crisis, social ills. And this is the place to be hearing the Srimad-Bhagavatam every single day, straight through, cover to cover, with pure devotees who have a taste. That's it. It's the medicine, it's the healthy state at the same time, it's everything. Sanatana Goswami's prayer says a lot. Srimad-Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram. It goes like this. Sarvasya Shabdipi Yusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths. You are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kali Dvandoditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Shri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Mannisdadaga Madbhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadhu tadayin atini chochata kada hanamun chogadashin mam premna rit kanta yospuda. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So here we are. 13th chapter, 11th canto, and the Hamsa-avatara, is answering the questions of Brahma through who?
The four Kumaras.
Huh?
The four Kumaras.
Four Kumaras. So then the four Kumaras, they asked him a question. What was the question? Now I'm seeing if you did your homework.
Who are you?
Who are you? Looks like we got to start a pupil over here, starting to come out. Right?
Four Kumaras asked a question like the material mind and...
No, they asked, who are you?
to Krishna, yeah.
To Krishna. And then Krishna said, what did Krishna say? What kind of question is that? If you mean, what is this form? If you're thinking that the form is material, then you should ask, who are you? Which five are you? Like that. So, in that way, he went deep into this issue and proved to them that they didn't know what they were talking about. and that they were actually, the idea was, I'm giving you too many answers here. I'm supposed to be asking questions. What was the idea? Why did Krishna think that they should have known better?
Because they claim to be intelligent.
No.
Because Brahma offered his obeisances to the Hamsa-avatara.
Another star student. There you go. Because he saw Brahma offering obeisances, and they're sons of Brahma, and they don't know anyone higher than Brahma. So therefore, they should have understood that this is the Supreme Lord. So there was no need to ask him who he was. Anyway, in that way, we got a little lesson yesterday about how to ask the proper questions if we want to get the proper answers. Okay, the heat's off. Everybody relax. Text 27. Waking, sleeping, and deep sleep are the three functions of the intelligence and are caused by the modes of material nature. The living entity within the body is ascertained to possess characteristics different from these three states, and thus remains as a witness to them. Purport. The spirit soul actually has nothing to do with the material world, having no permanent or natural relationship with it. Real renunciation means to give up the illusory identification with matter in its subtle and gross forms. Sushuptam, or deep sleep, indicates sleeping without any dreams or conscious activity. These three states are described by Lord Krishna as follows. Satvaj jagaranam vidyad, rajasa swapnamidishet, prasvapam tamasad jantos turiyam trishnusantatam. One should know that wakefulness is born of the mode of goodness, dreams from the mode of passion, and deep dreamless sleep from the mode of ignorance. The fourth element, pure consciousness, is different from these three and pervades them. Bhagavatam 11:25-20. Real freedom means sakshitmena, or to exist as a witness to the functions of illusion. Such an advantageous position is achieved by development of Krishna consciousness. 28. The spirit soul is trapped by the bondage of material intelligence, which awards him constant engagement in the illusory modes of nature. But I am the fourth stage of consciousness, beyond wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep. Becoming situated in me, the soul should give up the bondage of material consciousness. At that time, the living entity will automatically renounce the material sense objects and the material world. Purport. Lord Krishna now specifically answers the questions of the sages originally placed before Lord Brahma. Ultimately, the spirit soul has nothing to do with the material sense objects and modes of nature. But because of one's false identification with the material body, the modes of nature are empowered to engage one in illusory occupations. By destroying this false identification with matter, the soul gives up the illusory occupations awarded by the modes of nature. It is clearly stated in this verse that the living entity is not empowered to independently free himself from illusion, but must situate himself in Krishna consciousness, in full awareness of the Supreme Lord. It keeps coming back to this, doesn't it? How can I do this? You can't do it. It's the same answer every time. It is clearly stated in this verse that the living entity is not empowered to independently free himself from illusion, but must situate himself in Krishna consciousness, in full awareness of the Supreme Lord. 29. The false ego of the living entity places him in bondage, which awards him exactly the opposite of what he really desires. Therefore, an intelligent person should give up his constant anxiety to enjoy material life and remain situated in the Lord, who is beyond the functions of material consciousness. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami comments as follows. How does material existence cause the bondage of the living entity? And how can such bondage be given up? The Lord explains this here by the word ahankara kritam. Because of false ego, one is bound up in the network of illusion. Artha viparyayam indicates that although the living entity desires blissful life, eternity, and knowledge, he adopts procedures that actually cover over his eternal blissful nature and give him exactly the opposite result. The living entity does not want death and suffering, but these are actually the results of material existence, which is therefore useless for all practical purposes. An intelligent person should contemplate the unhappiness of material life and thus become situated in the Transcendental Lord. The word samsara chintam can be understood as follows. Samsara, or material existence, indicates material intelligence, because material existence only occurs because of the living entity's false intellectual identification with the material world. Because of this misidentification, one becomes overwhelmed with samsara chitam, anxiety to enjoy the material world. One should become situated in the Lord and give up such useless anxiety. Text 30. According to my instructions, one should fix the mind on me alone. If, however, one continues to see many different values and goals in life, rather than seeing everything within me, then although apparently awake, one is actually dreaming due to incomplete knowledge, just as one may dream that one has awakened from a dream. I had a friend once who did this. He used to sleepwalk. And while he was dreaming, he would walk down the stairs and he would still be in his dream. He wouldn't be awake. It was wild. It was spooky. Purport. Material existence is spooky. Isn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah.
You think you're going to get it, and you just almost get it, and you think you get it, and then it's gone. Purport. One who is not Krishna conscious cannot understand that everything is resting within the Lord, and thus it is impossible for him to retire from material sense gratification. One may adopt a particular process of salvation and consider oneself to be saved. Nevertheless, his material conditioning will remain, and thus he will maintain his attachment to the material world. Prabhupada used to joke, the Mayavadis are very, very expert at rejecting the material world and saying it's false, but they're also very expert at enjoying the material energy. That's the purpose of their philosophy. They say you can't talk about it in words. You can't imagine it in the mind, because some of the verses in the Upanishads say like that. So then why are they writing all these books? And what they're actually saying is, the Vedas you should throw away, because they're words. What they're saying is that Vyasadeva didn't know what he was talking about. That's what they're actually saying. Therefore they should be rejected, absolutely rejected. While one is dreaming, he sometimes imagines that he has awakened from a dream and is experiencing normal consciousness. Similarly, one may consider oneself to be saved, but if he remains absorbed in making material value judgments between good and bad, without reference to devotional service to the Supreme Lord, he is understood to be a conditioned soul, covered by the illusory identification with matter. 31. Those states of existence that are conceived of as separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead have no actual existence, although they create a sense of separation from the Absolute Truth. Just as a seer of a dream imagines many different activities and rewards, similarly, because of the sense of existence separate from the Lord's existence, the living entity falsely performs fruitive activities, thinking them to be the cause of future rewards and destinations. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments as follows. Although Lord Krishna, in his form as Hamsa-avatara, has condemned the intelligence that sees duality and separate values within the material world, the Vedas themselves institute the system of varnashram dharma, by which the entire human society is divided into different castes, occupations, and spiritual statuses. Therefore, how can the Lord recommend that one give up one's faith in this Vedic system? The answer is given in this verse as follows. The words anyesham bhavanam, or of other states of existence, refer to the innumerable divisions of false identification with the material body, mind, occupation, and so on. Such identification is illusion, and the material divisions of the varnashram system are certainly based on this illusion. The Vedic literatures promise heavenly rewards, such as residence in upper planetary systems, and prescribe the means to acquire such rewards. However, both the rewards and the means for achieving them are ultimately illusion. Since this world is the Lord's creation, one cannot deny that its existence is also real. Yet the living entity who identifies the creations of this world as belonging to himself is certainly an illusion. The example may be given that horns are real and rabbits are real, but if one imagines a rabbit's horns, that is certainly illusion. Though a rabbit's horns may occur in a dream. Similarly, the living entity dreams of a permanent relationship within the material world. One may dream that one is feasting on sumptuous sweet rice prepared with milk and sugar, but there is no actual nutritional value in the dream of royal feasting. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur remarks in this regard that just as one forgets the experience of a dream after awakening, similarly, a liberated soul in Krishna consciousness does not see anything substantial, even in the most exalted rewards offered by the Vedas. such as promotion to the heavenly planets. Therefore, Lord Krishna advised Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita to remain fixed in self-realization without being deviated by fruitive rituals performed in the name of religion. Text 32. While awake, the living entity enjoys with all of his senses the fleeting characteristics of the material body and mind. While dreaming, he enjoys similar experiences within the mind, and in deep, dreamless sleep, all such experiences merge into ignorance. By remembering and contemplating the succession of wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep, the living entity can understand that he is one throughout the three stages of consciousness and is transcendental. Thus he becomes the Lord of the senses. Purport. In verse 30 of this chapter, Lord Krishna stated that one must retire from material duality by the proper means, which the Lord now explains. One may first consider the three phases of consciousness mentioned above, and then understand one's own transcendental position as spirit soul. One experiences childhood, boyhood, adolescence, adulthood, middle age, and old age. And throughout these phases, one is experiencing things while awake and while dreaming. Similarly, one may, by careful intelligence, understand one's lack of consciousness during deep sleep, and thus, through intelligence, one may have experience of lack of consciousness. I'm just letting it sink in for a second. You got it? You've gone through all those things, and while you're going through all those things, you're going through these states of consciousness. And if we think about it, if we use our intelligence, then we can experience that we're different than those states. So we have to be convinced by our intelligence that we are different than those states. And then we begin to become relieved from material anxiety. Because the purpose of knowledge, the purpose of this knowledge, is to distance the influence of the material modes on us, the soul. Sometimes when an athlete or a soldier gets into a state, to win the game no matter what, or keep the life no matter what, they can do like things that normal people can't do. One may argue that it is actually the senses that experience during that experience during wakefulness, and that it is the mind that experiences during dreams. However, the Lord states here, Indriya Sha, the living entity is actually the Lord of the senses and mind, although temporarily he has become a victim of their influence. By Krishna consciousness, one may resume one's rightful position as master of the mental and sensory faculties. Also, since the living entity can remember his experiences in these three stages of consciousness, he is ultimately the experiencing agent or the seer of all phases of consciousness. He remembers, I saw so many things in my dream, and then my dream ended, and I didn't see anything. Now I'm waking up. This universal experience can be understood by everyone, and thus everyone can understand that one's actual identity is separate from the material body and mind. 33. You should consider how, by the influence of my illusory energy, these three states of mind, caused by the modes of nature, have been artificially imagined to exist in me. Having definitely ascertained the truth of the soul, you should utilize the sharpened sword of knowledge, acquired by logical reflection, and from the instructions of sages and Vedic literatures, to completely cut off the false ego, which is the breeding ground of all doubts. All of you should then worship me, who am situated within the heart. Purport. One who has obtained transcendental knowledge is no longer dependent on the three stages of ordinary consciousness, namely waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. One thus rids one's material mind of the tendency to become the enjoyer of the inferior energy of the Lord, and one sees everything as part and parcel of the Lord's potency, meant only for the enjoyment of the Lord Himself. In such a state of consciousness, one naturally surrenders fully to the Lord's devotional service, which Lord Hamsa here advises the sons of Lord Brahma to take up. Text 34. One should see that the material world is a distinct illusion appearing in the mind, because material objects have an extremely flickering existence and are here today and gone tomorrow. They can be compared to the streaking red line created by whirling a fiery stick. The spirit soul by nature exists in the single state of pure consciousness. However, in this world, he appears in many different forms and stages of existence. The modes of material nature divide the soul's consciousness into normal wakefulness, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. All such varieties of perception, however, are actually Maya and exist only like a dream. Purport. The Lord now describes an additional process for transcending the illusory interaction of the material mind and material sense objects. Lasa means jumping or dancing, and thus manaso vilasam here indicates that the material mind is jumping superficially from one conception of life to another. Our original consciousness, however, is one, vijnanam ekam. Therefore, one should carefully study the flickering, here today, gone tomorrow, nature of the material world, and detach oneself from the illusory variety of Maya. Text 35. Having understood the temporary, illusory nature of material things, and having pulled one's vision away from illusion, one should remain without material desires. By experiencing the happiness of the soul, one should give up material speaking and activities. If sometimes one must observe the material world, one should remember that it is not ultimate reality, and therefore one has given it up. By such constant remembrance, up till the time of death, one will not again fall into illusion. Purport. To maintain the material body, one cannot avoid eating and sleeping. In these and other ways, one will sometimes be forced to deal with the material world and the physical aspects of one's own body. At such times, one should remember that the material world is not actual reality, and that therefore one has given it up to become Krishna conscious. And by such constant remembrance, by enjoying spiritual bliss within oneself, and by retiring from any material activities of the mind, speech, or body, one will not fall into a material illusion. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments as follows. The living entity, while living in the external energy of the Lord, should give up any anxiety for sense gratification and should not act for his personal enjoyment. Rather, one should search out spiritual bliss through devotional service to the Supreme Lord. By reviving one's relationship with Lord Krishna, one will understand that if one accepts any material object for one's personal enjoyment, attachment will inevitably develop, and thus one will be bewildered by illusion. By gradually developing one's spiritual body, one will no longer desire to enjoy anything within the material world. 36. Just as a drunken man does not notice that he is wearing his coat or shirt, similarly, one who is perfect in self-realization and who has thus achieved the eternal identity does not notice whether the temporary body is sitting or standing. Indeed, if by God's will the body is finished, or if by God's will he obtains a new body, a self-realized soul does not notice. Just as a drunken man does not notice the situation of his outward dress. Purport. A Krishna-conscious person who has achieved his spiritual identity does not accept sense gratification in the material world as the goal of his life. He is constantly engaged in the service of the Lord and knows that the temporary body and flickering mind are material. By superior intelligence, in Krishna consciousness, he remains engaged in the Lord's service. The example of a drunken man in this verse is very nice. It is common knowledge that at mundane social gatherings, men become drunk and lose all awareness of their external situation. Similarly, a liberated soul has already achieved his spiritual body and therefore knows that his continued existence does not depend on the material body. A liberated soul does not, however, inflict punishment on the body, but rather remains neutral, naturally accepting his destiny as the will of the Supreme. 37. The material body certainly moves under the control of supreme destiny and therefore must continue to live along with the senses and vital air as long as one's karma is in effect. A self-realized soul, however, who is awakened to the absolute reality and who is thus highly situated in the perfect stage of yoga, will never again surrender to the material body and its manifold manifestations, knowing it to be just like a body visualized in a dream. Purport. Although Lord Krishna recommended in the previous verse that a self-realized soul not give attention to the body, it is clear from the Lord's statement here that one should not foolishly starve or injure the body, but should patiently wait until the chain of one's previous fruitive work has completely exhausted itself. At that time, the body will automatically die according to destiny. The following doubt may then arise. If a Krishna-conscious person pays proper attention to the maintenance of the body, if there is danger of again becoming attached, is there danger of again becoming attached to it? Lord Krishna here states that one who was highly elevated in Krishna consciousness, having understood Lord Krishna to be the actual vastu, or reality, never again surrenders to the illusory identification with the material body, which is just like the body seen in a dream. Text 38. My dear Brahmanas, I have now explained to you the confidential knowledge of Sankhya, by which one philosophically distinguishes matter from spirit, and of Ashtanga Yoga, by which one links up with the Supreme. Please understand that I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, and that I have appeared before you desiring to explain your actual religious duties. Purport. To increase the faith of Lord Brahma's sons and establish the prestige of his teachings, Lord Krishna now formally identifies himself as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, as stated in Vedic literature, Yagyovai Vishnu. After explaining the Sankhya and Ashtanga Yoga systems, the Lord clearly answers the original question of the sages, "Who are you, sir?" Thus Lord Brahma and his sons were enlightened by Lord Hamsa. O best of the Brahmanas, please know that I am the supreme shelter of the yoga system, analytic philosophy, virtuous action, truthful religious principles, power, beauty, fame, and self-control. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the synonymous words satyasya and ritasya refer to respectively the proper or virtuous execution of religious principles and a convincing presentation of religion. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti points out that the sons of Brahma were struck with wonder at the presentation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and were thinking, what wonderful knowledge we have just heard. Sound familiar? The Lord, recognizing their astonishment, spoke this verse to confirm their understanding of Him. Text 40. All superior transcendental qualities, such as being beyond the modes of nature, detached, the well-wisher, the most dear, the supersoul, equally situated everywhere, and free from material entanglement. All such qualities, free from the transformations of material qualities, find their shelter and worshipable object in me. Purport. Because in the previous verse, Lord Krishna explained his exalted nature, the sons of Brahma might have slightly doubted the Lord's position, thinking that they have detected some pride within the Lord's mind. Therefore, they may have doubted the instructions they had just received from Lord Hamsa. Anticipating any such reluctance, the Lord immediately clarifies the situation in the present verse. The Lord explains that unlike ordinary living entities up to the standard of Brahma, the Lord's transcendental body is not different from his eternal self and has no material qualities such as false egotism. The Lord's transcendental form is eternal, full of knowledge and bliss, and is thus nirgunam, beyond the modes of nature. Beyond the Lord, because the Lord completely ignores the so-called enjoyment offered by the illusory energy, he is called nirapekshakam, or being the best well-wisher of his devotees. Oh, yes. I'll read that again. Because the Lord completely ignores the so-called enjoyment offered by the illusory energy, he is called nirapekshakam, and being the best well-wisher of his devotees, he is called suridam. Priyam indicates that the Lord is the supreme lovable object, and that he establishes wonderful affectionate relationships with his devotees. Samya indicates that the Lord is neutral and detached in all material situations. These and other exalted qualities find their shelter and worshipable object in the Lord, who does not take material designations into consideration, but awards his mercy to anyone who takes shelter of him. In Srimad-Bhagavatam 1:16, 26 through 30, Mother Bhumi, the predominating deity of the earth, gives a list of some of the Lord's transcendental qualities, and even more are found in the Nectar of Devotion. Actually, the Lord's qualities are unlimited, but a small sample is given here simply to establish the Lord's transcendental position. Srila Madhvacharya has quoted from the Kala Samhita as follows. The demigods are not actually perfectly endowed with transcendental qualities. Indeed, their opulences are limited, and therefore they worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, who is simultaneously free of all material qualities and completely endowed with all transcendental qualities, which exist in his personal body. Text 41. Lord Krishna continued, My dear Uddhava, thus all of the doubts of the sages, headed by Sanaka, were destroyed by my words. fully worshipping me with transcendental love and devotion, they chanted my glories with excellent hymns. Text 42. The greatest of sages, headed by Sanaka Rishi, thus perfectly worshipped and glorified me, and as Lord Brahma looked on, I returned to my own abode. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 11th canto, 13th chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled The Hamsa-avatara Answers the Questions of the Sons of Brahma. It's so fascinating how we're hearing the conversations of the most elevated personalities in the universe, and yet what they're explaining is so basic, conceptions. I was listening to Gopi today, and he was saying how there are statements, isolated statements in the Upanishads that can be interpreted and are interpreted by impersonalists to come to a conclusion that the Absolute Truth has no form and no qualities. But the vast majority of the verses are talking about the Lord's qualities. Om Tad Vishnu Padam 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 Zyanti. He can run faster than anyone. He has no legs, but he can run faster than anyone. Saakshita, he glances at material nature, which means he must be there before the material nature starts. So there's all these statements, and vast majority of the verses in the Vedic hymns, especially the Upanishads, are giving different qualities of the Absolute Truth. But at the same time, sometimes there's one verse that says he doesn't have any qualities. Kaivalyam something. Kaivalya something. So therefore, when we're dealing with philosophy, when you have a contradictory statement, one of them has to be adjusted in order to make them true, because otherwise you have to kick out all the Vedas. And that's what they do. They kick out all the Vedas, and they think, like I said yesterday, they kick out the Vedas and they think that Vedavyasa is mistaken, and he made a mistake. So then Gopi describes how Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was, particularly Jiva Goswami, and great, philosopher sages, because not all of us are philosophers, but these great philosopher sages, rather than trying to adjust that everything, all the Vedic hymns don't mean anything because they're forms and they're words. We have to adjust something on the other side. The Lord cannot be understood by material words. The Lord cannot be understood by a materialistic intelligence. You just make that one adjustment to a few verses, and all the Vedic scriptures make perfect sense. Bye. See you later. Okay, we're going to go on for some more because we started late and it's still early. Chapter 14. Lord Krishna explains the yoga system to Sri Uddhava. In this chapter, Lord Krishna explains that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the most excellent method of spiritual practice. He also speaks about the process of meditation. Sri Uddhava wanted to know what process of spiritual advancement is the best. He also desired to hear about the super excellence of devotional service, free from ulterior motives. The Supreme Personality of Godhead replied to him that the original process of religion revealed in the Vedas had become lost during the time of annihilation. At the beginning of the new creation, therefore, the Supreme Lord spoke it again to Brahma. Brahma repeated it to Manu. Manu spoke it to the sages, headed by Bhrigu Muni, and these sages in turn instructed this eternal religion to the demigods and the demons. Because of the living entity's multitude of diverse desires, this system of religion was elaborately explained in different ways. Thus, different philosophies arose, including various atheistic doctrines. Because the living entity, bewildered by illusion, is incapable of ascertaining his eternal benefit, he mistakenly identifies ordinary vows of penance, austerity, etc., to be the topmost spiritual practice. He mistakenly identifies ordinary vows of penance, austerity, etc., to be the topmost spiritual practice. But the only true means of achieving happiness is to meditate on offering everything to the Supreme Lord. In this way, one becomes free from all desires for selfish gratification through enjoyment of mundane sense objects, and he becomes released from all hankering for either enjoyment or liberation. The Lord then proceeded to describe the superior process of devotional service, which destroys countless sinful reactions and produces many symptoms of spiritual happiness, such as the standing of the hairs on end. Pure devotion, having the power to purify the heart, enables one to achieve the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and because the devotee is very dear to the Lord and is always close to him, he is able to turn to purify the entire universe. The virtue of his unflinching devotion to the Lord. By virtue of his unflinching devotion to the Lord, the devotee can never be completely diverted by the objects of sense enjoyment. Thus, if he is not able to gain control over his senses in the beginning, even if he is not able to gain control over his senses in the beginning, one desiring to attain the perfection of life is advised to give up all material processes of elevation as well as the association of women. He should then merge his mind constantly in thought of Lord Krishna. Finally, the Lord instructed Sri Uddhava about the true object of meditation. Text 1. Sri Uddhava said, "My dear Krishna, the learned sages who explain Vedic literature recommend various processes for perfecting one's life. Considering these varieties of viewpoint, my Lord, please tell me whether all these processes are equally important or whether one of them is supreme." Purport. In order to clearly establish the exalted position of Bhakti Yoga, or pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord, Sri Uddhava requests Lord Krishna to identify the Supreme among all processes of self-realization. Not all Vedic processes lead directly to the ultimate goal, pure love of God. Some only gradually elevate the consciousness of the living entity. Not all Vedic processes lead directly to the ultimate goal, pure love of God. Some only gradually elevate the consciousness of the living entity. For the purpose of giving a general outline of the process of self-realization, sages may discuss the various methods of elevation. But when the time comes to ascertain the most perfect process, the secondary methods must be cleared from the path. Text 2. My dear Lord, you have clearly explained the process of unalloyed devotional service, by which a devotee removes all material association from his life, enabling him to fix his mind on you. Purport. It is now clearly established that pure devotional service is the supreme process for fixing the mind on the supreme truth, Lord Krishna. The next point to be clarified is this: can everyone practice this process, or is it limited to an elite class of transcendentalists? In discussing the relative advantages of different spiritual processes, one must immediately ascertain the goal of spiritual life, and then isolate the process that actually awards this goal. Processes must be defined in terms of primary and secondary functions. A method that gives one the highest perfection is primary, whereas processes that merely assist or enhance the primary function are considered secondary. The mind is most flickering and unsteady. Therefore, by clear intelligence, one must fix oneself in a progressive mode of life, and thus one can achieve the absolute truth in this lifetime. This is the sober purpose of Lord Krishna's conversation with Sri Uddhava. Text 3. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "By the influence of time, the transcendental sound of Vedic knowledge was lost at the time of annihilation. Therefore, when the subsequent creation took place, I spoke the Vedic knowledge to Brahma, because I myself am the religious principles enunciated in the Vedas." Purport. Lord Krishna explains to Uddhava that although many processes and concepts of spiritual realization are described in the Vedas ultimately recommend devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Lord Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure, and his devotees directly enter into the Lord's Ladini, or pleasure-giving potency. Somehow or other, one must fix one's mind in Lord Krishna, and that is not possible without devotional service. One who has not developed his attraction to Lord Krishna cannot restrain the senses from inferior engagements. Since other Vedic processes do not actually award Lord Krishna to the practitioner, they cannot offer the highest benefit in life. The transcendental sound of the Vedas is itself the highest evidence. But one whose senses and mind are entangled in sense gratification and mental speculation, and whose heart is therefore covered by material lust, cannot directly receive the transcendental Vedic message. Thus, one cannot appreciate the exalted position of devotional service to the Lord. And we're going to stop there. Hare Krishna.
This is much better.
Huh?
I like this chapter better.
You like it too much.
The earlier one was compared to the earlier one.
That's because you're a pure devotee and we're trying to follow in your footsteps. Yeah, this is the essence. It's not easy to understand. But once one starts to be absorbed in devotional service, we can understand it. I mean, you think it's hard to understand these verses? You try to say these verses to a materialist. He hasn't got any idea what you're talking about. Another language. When I was on book distribution before, regularly every day, I would regularly read things out to the books on people just to try to see who was who and try to get the books out. And some people I'd read the same passage and they would say, what language is this book in? Forget it, get out of here. And the next person I'd do the same thing, they'd say, that's exactly what I've been trying to find. I'll take it. What do you need? What do you want? It's like, I can see Sarva's poring over the material over there. He's just waiting to give us take us somewhere with his steel-trapped intelligence. Okay, here we go. Sarvas is going to start us off. Our pundit's in the hospital with another new pundit, Jair.
Just as a drunken man does not notice if he is wearing his coat and shirt, similarly one who is perfect in self-realization and doesn't notice whether his body is sitting or standing. I thought that was a nice analogy.
There's that verse in the Gita, as usual, in the Uddhava Gita, it's all unpacking the Gita. It's all here in the Gita. It's 5th chapter, text 8 and 9. Naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyeta tattvavit. Pashan shrinban sprishan jigran ashnan gachchan supan shwasan. Pralapan bisrijan grinan unmishan nimishan napi indriyan indriyarteshu vartanta ididarayan. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. It's the beginning of the stage, actually. The ending of the stage is when you're actually come to the point of knowing who you are in the spiritual world, and inside yourself, staying there and engaging in the service that you do. This is called Srup Siddhi, Vastu Siddhi. And then you lose track completely. But still, the body goes through its functions just automatically by the modes of nature. So in one of them, you're conscious that you're in the body and all these things are going on, but you're conscious that it's just the modes of nature doing it, and you're different from those things. And that's the meditation that we've been hearing about in those difficult portions of the philosophy. you know, the different states of consciousness, waking, sleeping, deep sleep, and how you can, by meditation, by contemplation, remember being in those states when you were a little girl or boy, or, you know, a little young man, woman, middle-aged person, old, and an old person. And you can remember those things. And by deeply thinking, deeply, means meditating, contemplating deeply about it, then you can perceive yourself to be different than the body. But that's only the preliminary stage. The preliminary stage is when you start to do devotional service and you actually, by hearing and chanting about the Lord, and you get attracted to the Lord, and then you eventually get attracted to one of the forms of the Lord, and then eventually you get attracted to the devotees who serve that form of the Lord in a certain way in the spiritual world, and you desire to go there and serve them and learn from them, be trained how to serve. Then you meditate on your service in the spiritual world. And at that point, your body may still be going through its motions, but you are not conscious at all. But when a person comes from the spiritual world to help the Lord deliver the fallen conditioned souls, then they have this, they come down from that plane to discriminate who is Krishna conscious and who is not. And the Lord even comes not like that, but he comes to actually attract us back to the spiritual world by exhibiting his pastimes, which are all attractive. Hare Krishna.
A lot of people have out-of-body experiences, which shows the body is different from
Yes.
the self.
Yes.
I remember one time I had a tooth infection when I was in college. And you're not supposed to have a tooth pulled when it's infected.
Oh.
So I had it pulled. Then I was paying the bill. And all of a sudden...
While you were paying the bill?
Yeah. And I heard I sort of saw myself.
Uh-huh.
People were grabbing my body and saying, "Oh, look what happened." That's it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people had some kind of experience like that.
Yeah. Everyone has the capacity to have the experience that has given that understanding at some point during their life. Most devotees have had something like that happen.
But it said somewhere that there's this strong desire to enjoy samsara.
Yes. I mean, we talked to Prabhupada about this, because those of us who had psychedelic experience, conscious altering, substances, put it that way, drugs, but that's the way we would put it in nice language. And there were some very high professors and people, even in Harvard and other places, who were experimenting with these things to try to, develop their consciousness and investigate and experiment. And so we thought that this was a stage of development that, brought us to Prabhupada. So we asked him, Prabhupada, is this the things we saw this and we saw that, and we saw through each other and saw firebrands in the sky and so many things. And Prabhupada said, no, he said, you just flunked. you were given some chance to see, Maya, what it was, but you flunked. You thought that Maya was spiritual. He said, you can't have a spiritual experience through a material energy. Not possible. That kind of brought us down to earth. But still, we were happy that somehow or other we had come to Prabhupada's lotus feet. I think one time he said that it gave you a sense of ability to see how wonderful something that's actual spiritual is from that state. You know, in Haight-Ashbury and Lower East Side of New York, people would regularly have what they would call bad trips, or they would get freaked out. They wouldn't be able to handle it, you know. And sometimes they would come to the realization that material existence is horrible by that experience, you know. They would feel very insecure and then they would grasp out. That would cause them to grasp out. But Prabhupada, anyway, he eliminated all of those kinds of romantic ideas about what was happening to us. And he would say, just keep chanting and it'll go away, don't worry. And then somebody asked him, can I ever recover the brain cells that I might have lost when I was doing these things? And Prabhupada said, no. But you can go back to Godhead. Because you're not your brain either. So powerful, devotional service. Attachment to Krishna is so powerful. Therefore, it always comes down to that. If we just learn to think of Krishna, and the easiest way to do it, of course, is by chanting Hare Krishna all the time.
You know, one of the verses said, we're so attached to trying to enjoy this samsara. It seems like that's why we keep identifying with the body.
Yeah.
The material body and mind are instruments for doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why before, you weren't here yesterday, but in the verses before it said, the sense, objects of the senses are always coming into the mind, and the mind is always going to the objects of the senses. So there's a mutual going into each other, and therefore it's not possible to come out of it by yourself. Therefore, these ideas that the yoga means to stop the mind and, sit down and just stop it, and then you can transcend it. It's all just a figment of people's imagination. There may be some slight, advantage to being able to sit and keep your mind focused on one thing. There's some benefit from that. That's described in the 6th chapter, in those verses, that describe the Ashtanga yoga system. And one of them is, you sit in a straight line and, you stare at the tip of your nose and just concentrate on one point, the tip of your nose, and in that way it kind of concentrates your mind a little bit. But then at the end it says, then make me the goal of life. That concentration should be focused on Krishna's form. Yukta asita mat paraha.
The other day there was a mention of this verse in the Gita, something about if you're in the dense darkness, one becomes indifferent to everything that's heard or something like that.
Yes.
It was kind of funny, but many years ago there was a bhakta in Houston, and that was about the only verse that he knew. And if he would be doing something kind of unusual and needed to be corrected, he would quote that verse.
Yeah. I'm indifferent to what you picture. And that's a nice way to misuse philosophy to get out of accepting the instructions of your spiritual master.
He was a real spacey guy. His name was John.
Yeah, you got to be spacey to think with that one up.
But Mayavadis have their own kind of sneaky twist of philosophy, which trying to avoid serving. It was all one year.
Or this morning maybe, and sometime the last few days, I heard him talk about this, the Mayavadis have interpreted the verses to come with a impersonal conclusion. So nothing is real. Nothing is real. Anything with a form, it's not real. Then you can't explain it by words. You can't. We said that before, earlier on tonight. but they continue to engage with it. You know, they don't just go and stay in the. They even if they approach it by stopping their material activities, or any activity rather, they can't stay there. They have to come back, the Mayavadis, and do, you know, all kinds of different activities, philanthropic activities, and even sensual activities. They can't stop it. Therefore, what does it say in the 12th chapter? I just chanted it today, actually. I think. Yeah, I chanted 12th chapter today. In the Klesho Dikata Dastecham Avyakta Sakta Chetasam. Wow. I'm impressed. Yeah, Dehivavyabhapyate means that, that then the verse before that says that even those who worship the unmanifested, the impersonal form, absolute, beyond conception form of the Lord, eventually by treating everybody equal, you know, and doing good, trying to do good to others, they actually come to me eventually. And then the next verse is Klesho Digatare. But it's so troublesome. It's very troublesome because we're embodied. To try to think we're not the body when we're embodied, it's very difficult. Unless we do something that has action and form and, you know, and connects with supreme form, transcendental forms, you know, then it's very difficult. All we get is the trouble it takes. Somebody wrote a song about that. It is exactly 7:30, and I'm going to try to start up the Bhagavad Gita recording tomorrow, so I will take your leave. Thank you very much. You've all done your homework so nicely, and you're so attracted to the real philosophy of life. I always pray that I can stay in your holy association. Thank you, all of you out there in cyberspace. And Sudevi, I noticed that you were watching. Thank you very much. And anyone else that's out there watching that I can't see because I can only see it when the screen is turned around so that I can see it. But we appreciate every single one of you that come on, and we pray that you will keep coming and sharing the nectar that's being transmitted by Krishna to Uddhava and Hamsa to the four Kumaras, and all the nectar that's flowing out of the Srimad-Bhagavatam in this Uddhava Gita. Hare Krishna Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Uddhava Gita ki jai, Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. See you tomorrow, same time, 6 o'clock, Central Time, same place, same station. See you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.